My name is Dr. Austin Tay, and you are listening to Psych Chat. Welcome to episode 6 of Psych Chat. In this episode, I interviewed Dr. Simon Mounce, founding partner of My Writing Coach, where he shared with us why it is important to learn the art of written communication in the workplace. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And as always, if you have any comments or suggestions, please send them to psychchat@omnisci.com or tweet to psych_chat. This podcast is brought to you by Omnisci Consulting. Welcome to this episode of Psych Chat. We are very delighted today to have Dr. Simon Mounce, founding partner of My Writing Coach. He will be here to talk to us about why is written communication important in the workplace. Welcome, Simon.
Thanks, Austin. Really good to be here. Thanks.
Well, perhaps maybe you could start a little bit with introducing yourself to our listeners.
Well, a lot of people ask me why I got into this field of writing in the workplace. A lot of people think it's a very dry subject, that they find it hard to imagine how anybody could be really interested in this. But I found that I was drawn to it because I felt that I could recognize quite easily the problems that people were having and the consequences of those problems, not just in the workplace, but to the well-being of people in the workplace. So I look at it as a much broader subject than just how to express an idea in writing. I look at it much more as a critical thinking skill. How to think strategically, how to cause action, how to influence people, how to develop relationships with people in the workplace. So looking at it that way, I was much more invigorated. You know, I felt that I could actually contribute something. So I started a business back in 2006. It's called My Writing Coach. I feel now that almost as if I should change the name because, as I said, it's about much more than just how to express ideas. But I started the business. It's a corporate training business, and I go into companies and I work with groups of 10 or 15 people, and we take them through a program which blends workshops with coaching. I'll talk more about that later. But I find that the impact we have on companies goes way beyond what the companies might expect from a program like this. And it's so rewarding for me and for the people that take part.
Sure. I mean, as we were saying, you're based here in Hong Kong, and you started this business in 2006. I know, looking at your website, you do have kind of courses, and you do actually do this beyond Hong Kong itself.
Oh, yeah.
One question I want to ask is, do you see a great difference in terms of the different nationalities who are going through this course with you?
That's a great question. And of course, I do see very different issues with different groups. In Asia, I'm sure most people listening to this will be aware that there are certain cultural behaviors which prevent people from writing strategically, that is, writing to cause action, to influence people directly. So, one of the issues is the hierarchy that we see in companies and the reluctance of individuals to communicate directly to somebody who's senior than they are. So we have to work quite hard with those people to look at the fundamental principles behind why they feel that way. And we have to give them tools to help them overcome some of the limitations that they have imposed upon themselves or that the culture has imposed upon them. So we have to encourage them to recognize what it is they're trying to achieve in a written piece, who it is they're writing to. We have to expose to them what the principle is, and that is that readers can't absorb lots of detail unless they first know what to do with it. And then once they've absorbed that principle, they're much more likely to overcome this cultural limitation, which prevents them from getting to the point very quickly. So that's just one example. Another example is that in this part of the world, people follow convention. And the convention has been to write in a very formal style, a very impersonal and indirect style. So again, we guide them towards discovering the principles behind why we can change that, why we should change it. And once they recognize the principle, they're much more likely to feel empowered or to be given permission to change, so that they're writing in a much more natural, personal way. Of course, if they do that, they're going to get better relationships with the reader, even their senior, and they're much more likely to achieve what they want to achieve in writing. But if we look at, even within Asia, there are big differences in the way that people communicate and the way that they write. So, for example, in Japan and Korea, people are very reluctant to be direct. That is, to get to the point quickly. It's a high context culture. They're used to communicating a lot of contextual detail. In speaking, that's fine because a lot of it is understood between people from the same culture. But in writing, they feel they need to actually include all of that context. And it means that the readers are often very frustrated by the overload. In India, we see that the conventions of writing are very strong. So in India, they like to use a very elaborate writing style, which appears very strange to people from other cultures. So we have to work with them to convince them that they would save so much time, their own time, their manager's time, their reader's time, if they were to just simplify the way that they write. And if they are to overcome their instinct to write in a sophisticated way, which they feel builds their professional profile, their status. So we have a lot of challenges in places like that in changing people's mindset so that they become comfortable with writing simply and directly.
You just mentioned those countries, English not their first language. Right. How about times where you have to actually help someone who is, educated in Western country where English is actually part of their first language? Yeah.
We have, and this surprises a lot of people, but we have quite a high proportion of native speakers coming to us for help. Sometimes they've been nudged towards us for help by their managers. So often with the native speakers, we do have to deal with a little bit of resistance. But native speakers have a lot to gain because even though they might have the language proficiency, that is the language resources, they need a lot of help in how to use those resources effectively to achieve things at work. I'm sure we've all experienced a native speaker manager who writes, massive emails that just go on and on and on, no structure. The key point is buried deep down. We're left wondering what we're supposed to do with it all. They need a lot of help. So what we do is not language training as such. It's the writing competency, the writing skill that we're trying to develop.
Right. I mean, hearing what you said, I remember when I first started kind of writing properly, professionally for articles and also for thesis. One of the things that I kind of reflect and I look at is Sir Ernest Gower. Everybody knows that he's very proper, the way he's written, maybe archaic to a certain extent. Do you think his style of writing is still applicable in today's world? Or
see, he was a visionary of his time. So that's why I think that his writing has had the shelf life that it has. But even his vision is coming to an end now. On the first point, he prescribes how we should write. He gives us words, phrases that we can build into our writing. Our approach is not so prescriptive. I think these days it's more descriptive. So we look at how people are actually using the language and we're helping people fit into best practice. So you could group together even Webster, even the people that wrote these prescriptive dictionaries and Roget's Thesaurus. They've been good tools, but that prescriptive approach is dying out in favor of the more descriptive approach, the online tools that you can use to research how people are actually using the language.
Sure. I mean, you mentioned about descriptive, and also from what you were saying, sometimes people do tend to write too much.
Yeah.
Going through the course with you, they will be able to learn how to edit. One thing that came to my mind is, is all well and good to be able to learn how to edit, but you must have a kind of ability to choose the right words to describe certain things. Yeah. And I think that also comes to the fact that whether the person reads extensively or has a kind of a bag full of good adjectives to describe certain things. And being succinct is kind of very important, especially in the workplace.
In the workplace, especially.
How do you encourage people to perhaps adopt descriptive words or find words to write?
Okay, so when I ask people on our programs, or when I ask their managers and their learning and development team, what they worry about most in their writing, they will say grammar and they will say vocabulary. We teach people how to use simple writing. That is, how to communicate complex ideas simply. So we promote what we do as a solution, as a shortcut to overcoming their concerns and their problems with grammar and vocabulary. So the shortcut to overcoming problems with grammar is not to learn more grammar.
Yeah.
Most people who come onto our programs have got enough, even if they think they don't. And the solution to overcoming people's concerns that they don't know enough words is to tell them to stop looking for more words. Usually you have enough words to express an idea. So a large part of our program is to change people's mindset so that they are less concerned about these things and so that they become comfortable with using simple, familiar grammar and vocabulary.
I mean, you mentioned also there's a lot of apps in the market at the moment that people could refer to. Can they not just use that rather than coming to a course like what you're offering?
They can use those things if they bear in mind that most of them are designed to help them with their language proficiency, that is, how good they are at English. Few of them are designed to help them improve their writing. So they can help if they are used with caution, and they can help in a retrospective way. So after you've written something, you can get some feedback on how you might improve the syntax of one sentence, for example. But our approach is to take it from the other direction, and that is to help them discover the principles which underpin why we should communicate in the way that we do. So I mentioned one earlier. The principle is that readers can't absorb fine details if they first don't know what to do with it. Okay, so that principle, once they've thoroughly absorbed that, and it makes absolute sense, but once they've thoroughly absorbed that, they will never begin an email or a report with lots of background detail. In fact, beginning with the background section is the worst thing that you can do. They will begin with the action point for the reader. It could be a request, a recommendation, a suggestion, a proposal. It could be the intention of, they could be expressing only their intention. But they will begin with that strategic part. Then they will predict what question their reader is likely to ask about that.
Sure.
And then they can answer that question directly. And then in this adaptive process, they can predict the next question their reader is likely to ask, and they can answer that one directly. So this is the way that we train people to remain reader focused all the way through, whatever it is they're writing. This is the way that we train people to save their time and the reader's time. It's the way that we can make their writing far more concise. You know, because if you begin with background, you're just going to write everything you know on the topic.
Yep.
Just in case the reader might need it later.
Right.
And that's a very localized habit, deeply embedded in the culture.
Yep.
But if we train people to develop the mindset where they begin with the part which is more strategic, and then they follow with the supporting details, those are the direct answers to the questions that the reader is likely to ask, then they will cut down the amount of time they spend on writing by at least half, and they'll cut down the volume of the writing by at least half.
Could you give us an example? What do you mean by a strategic point versus maybe a background point?
Okay. Well, very often we write emails to ask someone to do something. So people have the habit now of writing as they're thinking. So they might begin the email with some of the facts that are in their mind at the moment. They might describe a current problem, for example. They are processing those facts as they are writing. They're seeing the links between the facts. They're building a case. They build the case towards a conclusion. And then once they've come to that conclusion, they realize what it is they need to ask their reader to do. So, of course, we need to go through that process, but we don't need to write down that whole process, that analysis for our readers. A good writer will go through that process. They can write it out if they want to. But at the end of it, they will recognize what it is they want their readers to do. They will bring that right up to the beginning, and then they will answer their reader's likely question about that point. So an example of purely descriptive will be a description of the problem. It might be a narrative, a historical account of what's been going on in a company. An example of a strategic part would be the request, the recommendation, the suggestion, the reader's intention. It will be the part which has in it, explicit or implied, it will be the part which has in it the action. Okay, so a big part of our programs is trying to develop the mindset where people see first what the action is, and then they have the courage to put that at the beginning.
I understand that most of your courses are face-to-face with your
Yeah,
participants.
they're blended. So, and a big part of each program is a face-to-face workshop. Yeah.
Right. With what is going on in the world with the coronavirus, what are you doing to make it different and attractive for your participants?
Well, I think like a lot of training providers, anybody who does face-to-face delivery, the virus was bad news. And in Hong Kong, we've already had the protests, so our business was quite badly affected by that as well. But what I saw as soon as this broke, as soon as I got the postponements and the cancellations coming in, I realized that I had to look at a way of delivering virtual programs. These are programs that people can do from their desks or from their homes. Mm-hmm. And then I had to think about, well, how can I replicate what we do in the classroom virtually? So I went to a lot of my associates, a lot of people that work in schools and universities. Of course, they've had to change very quickly, but with the support of their own IT people, I had to go to those and I asked them what they were doing, what works well. And through that research and lots of online reading, I identified tools that I can use pretty much to replicate everything that I would do in the classroom.
Right.
So we're talking about activities that people can collaborate on in real time, using Zoom to get the relationship with the readers, with the participants, and so that they can see each other and talk to each other through video. Google Classrooms holds a lot of activities that are dynamic that people can collaborate on, and I can see them collaborating in real time, and I can jump into breakout rooms. And so it is possible, but I realize I've long believed that even if you do a face-to-face element, it's not enough. When we are trying to change habits, we need to make that face-to-face element just part of a much longer program, which blends that face-to-face, all the virtual learning element, with pre-session tasks, post-session coaching. We have to transfer what they've learned in the classroom into the workplace.
Sure.
So right from the beginning, even before I started my own company and I worked for a university here, right from the beginning, we blended workshop training with coaching.
Right. So to make sure that people kind of carry on applying what they learn into their workplace.
Yeah, it's a big part of the psychology of learning, right?
Yes.
I mean, research shows literally as soon as you walk through a doorway, 30% of the stuff blows away on the wind. So we have to find a way of transferring the skills from the classroom environment into the workplace environment. And we do that by coaching people on their actual workplace writing.
The coaching bit, how long do you do that for?
It's 8 weeks, 12 weeks, something like that.
Right.
Depends on how much of the workshop component that they've had.
Right.
The point is that we're trying to change mindset and we're trying to develop new habits. So doing a 1 day, even a 2 day workshop, you're not going to be able to achieve that. You can expose people to new ways, but how can you be sure that they're actually developing the new habit? So we have to stay with them. We have to measure the application of skills throughout that process, partly because it motivates the learner, but also because the learning and development team expect to see some measurement.
Sure.
And that's the great thing about training people in writing skills, is that it's very easy to measure.
Yeah. I mean, again, looking at your website, I saw a lot of testimonials. Definitely the way you're teaching is giving a lot of people a new way of communicating, the new way of writing. But there are definitely still different types of obstacles that you have encountered on the way of how people can actually write effectively here, maybe in Asia.
Yes. Yeah. I get comments sometimes from participants that they love this way of writing. They can see that they can be much more authentic when they use this style. They can get better relationships. They can save time. They're aware of all of the benefits, but they say, well, my line manager does not write that way.
Yep.
My line manager writes in a very formal, indirect, old-fashioned writing style. My line manager thinks like that, behaves like that, has that character. Who am I to change him?
Sure.
So my message to those people is to experiment little by little, try things here and there. If they try something that the manager benefits from, then that line manager will slowly come round to support this way of writing. He or she will see the benefits. And what I've found is that when people do this, their line manager may not acknowledge it explicitly, but their line manager might actually start to adopt some of the techniques that the participant is using. Certainly, the peers and the subordinates of the people that come on these programs start to adopt the techniques. And, you know, we're very keen on helping people recognize their own achievements. So at the end of every program, we develop a learning plan. We give them independent learning strategies, and we highlight the key indicators. These are the things that they will look out for so that they recognize their own achievements. And one of those things is to recognize when their readers start adopting the same skills that they're using.
I mean, you were saying about changing the mindset and the psychology of motivation is also important. We are trying to get people to learn something new, maintaining that coaching element after the face-to-face training itself is also very important. What else do you think we advice that you can give to maybe people who have not know about writing it properly or wanting to know a bit more about your course itself, if they are actually listening to this podcast at the moment, what can they do to kind of break those conventions or the kind of culture they are in to perhaps improve the way they write at the moment?
I think everybody who believes in the modern, direct, simple, plain English writing style has a role. They need to adopt a position of ambassador or champion, because this is a movement. It's a global movement. We all have to become part of it. Some people work in companies which are very traditional, very hard to change. But every little bit helps. So, as I mentioned earlier, they could try little things slowly to change the way that people feel about this modern business writing style. But what I usually suggest to people, if they want to develop independent learning strategies, is to not to self-study as much, not to go to websites and learn from those websites what they're supposed to do. It's not a bad thing, but it may be discouraging, because we all know that if you read how to do something doesn't mean that you're going to be able to do it, or that you'll have the willingness to apply those things straight away. So what I will suggest to people is that they invest time in evaluating everything that they receive. They look for the good bits and the bad bits. If they've been on a program, they have the tools to evaluate in depth. But if they haven't been on a program, they will surely be aware of whether an email is good or not. And if they dig a bit deeper to figure out exactly why it works well, and if they do that time after time after time, they will develop a mindset that they will be absolutely familiar with what works well. They will be much more likely to do that in their own writing. And if they also collect good models, build a bank of model emails or reports, then they will be equipped to sustain this change in the long term. And I think a very important part of independent learning is sharing what they've learned.
Yes.
As soon as we share something, it becomes a bigger part of who we are. So I encourage people, if they can build this bank of model text, that they develop a network of people around them who would benefit from those. They don't just make them available to those people, but every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, they come together as a group of 5 or 6 people. They review something that they can submit, something that they've written recently.
Sure.
They can pass it around. They can talk about how they can align better to the models. So observing is one thing. Evaluating in more depth is even better. Collecting and building banks of model text is great, but none of this will really take hold unless they share it. Mentoring. Helping other people, it just builds the way that people feel about the writing skill. Activating relationships with line managers, with peers, asking for direct feedback on the writing itself, giving direct feedback on writing to other people, as I mentioned, the mentoring thing. Talking about difficult writing tasks before they start writing. And there's nothing wrong with going to the ultimate reader of that piece of writing and asking them what they want from it. So in summary, it's about observing, evaluating, sharing, asking for support, giving support, helping others.
For the listeners listening to this podcast at the moment, as an individual, how will you tell them that effective writing is important? What would be your advice to them? Why is it important to them?
They may not see the benefits of investing lots of time into developing their writing skills if they look at it just as the expression of an idea in words and grammar. That is a part of the writing skill, of course. The writing skill is also achieving things at work, developing relationships with readers. It's also about recognizing how to influence people. So if they see the writing skill as much more strategic, much more of a tool to build their profile at work, to achieve promotion, to get better relationships, to make their life easier, then they will be much more inclined to absorb the ideas that we're sharing with them, and then ultimately to share those ideas with the people around them.
Yes, as you are more clear in the way you convey your message, you're able to engage with more people, getting your ideas across, and that would definitely help in the way you work, your productivity, and
life is better. Life is so much better if you can live authentically.
Yes,
in every way, and writing is just part of that. Yeah. And considering research shows that people spend a third of their time a week writing and reading emails. If we could live more authentically in that part of our workspace, then it just feels so much better. And if you can adopt new skills, you thoroughly believe in them, they become a part of your personality, your character, your persona at work.
Sure.
Then we just feel much better about ourselves.
Yeah, I think it's important. I mean, not only just for the individuals, but also for organization to have employees who are good at writing, communication, and so forth. And I think as you were sharing me earlier on, that also impact on how maybe an organization function.
Absolutely, yeah. There's also research that shows that a company can generate 47% higher return with better writing skills. We see that if our relationships with our clients are mainly through writing, we can develop not only a broader client base, but much deeper relationships with clients. One study shows that better email marketing increases return on investment by 3,800%.
Wow.
And as far as leadership is concerned, we promote writing skills, or what we do as a leadership skill, because we know that vague writing dilutes leadership. People are not clear about what they're supposed to do. They're disengaged. People like to know what they're supposed to do with the information that you send to them. So good writing has been shown to retain staff 50% more than bad writing. Productivity goes up by 21% with good writing. So, we could say that it makes you feel better, but if a company wants to invest, they need to know the bottom line.
Sure.
And there is so much evidence to show that good writing is good for a company's bottom line.
Good. Well, that's a lot of information for the listeners and also to myself. I mean, I now have to be very mindful the way I write in my emails, because one of the things that you described is I'm the kind of person who like to write my processes on an email, and then I edit as I go along.
Yes.
And then definitely I've picked up some tips and also be mindful of how I write. Thank you very much, Simon, for spending time talking to us today.
Yes, really enjoyed the chat. Thanks.
And of course, we will be putting your contacts in the show notes.
Well, I'm very happy to answer individual questions. I enjoy that kind of interaction with people. Each question might challenge me a little bit, but I really enjoy the challenge. So do send in your questions.
Good. Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you.
You have been listening to Psych Chat. This podcast is brought to you by Omnisci Consulting. We are a team of psychologists with a wealth of experience in working with individuals, teams, and organizations in the areas of coaching, executive selection, assessment and development, career transitioning, and workplace intervention. Omnisci Consulting exists to solve the critical issues facing our clients, both large and small. Our approach is to tailor-make each service to meet the requirements of our clients. Our broad range of services and solutions help individuals and organizations to facilitate change, achieve their vision, and optimize performance and productivity. For more information about our services, do check us out at www.omnisci.com.